We recognise the Kaurna people as the custodians of the lands and waters of the Adelaide region and pay our respects to elders past and present. We acknowledge and respect the Kaurna people's cultural, spiritual, physical and emotional connection with their land, waters and community, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and First Nations people.
I feel like that was a lot better than every clap I've done all day.
I was terrified.
I
of
don't think we
using
can compare claps. This isn't Smart Month. Go ahead.
Smart Month is done.
It's done.
Although maybe we'll bring it back. Maybe we're doing like
We should do another Smart Month. We should do
What we
Queer
do,
No,
we do
queer books
yearly.
aren't horny.
Smart. Yeah,
Not ever.
And you're smart.
because we don't have to reproduce, you see. So there's no point in sex.
That's why queer people don't do it.
Right,
This
we're
is
just going to
gonna
wait
be
till
fun.
we can calm behind the camera now. Yeah. Welcome back to Amy and I'm Amy Matthews and we're launching Pride Month. It's Pride Month. So I've got my rainbow on. I've noticed you guys broke your rainbows out as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Especially Harry, very colourful.
very colourful as is usual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Harry doesn't need the rainbow.
Harry is the rainbow.
Harry is, yeah.
Harry brings the rainbow every day. Anyway, I'm going to introduce you now that I've used your names. Harry Stewart's joining me today
Hello.
and Abby Guy
Hey.
and Justina Ashman,
Hello.
who I am hoping is going to bring the dad jokes.
Oh, I can't do it under pressure.
Don't put me on the spot.
No.
Anyway, we're going to talk queer books, really, aren't we? Queer authors, queer books, representations of queerness in books. And shout out to all, and my cat is joining me for this if you're watching. Shout out to all our LGBTQIA plus siblings who are joining us today. Now, Justina wrote the questions for me today, and I have not actually read them. So I'm quite looking forward to what might come out of my mouth in a minute. All right, the three of you. What is the first queer character you remember encountering in a book?
Oh, that's hard. I don't.
I sort of know. I think the first one that I actually, when I read it, I was like, this is a queer character, was in Tamora Pierce's The Will of the Empress. And that's like the ninth book in that kind of set in that world. And which I kind of loved because it was a character that you've met and you knew before. And those books follow characters from when they're children through to adulthood. So it makes sense when they're children, there's not a lot of romance in those books at all. But when we meet this character as an adult and she falls in love with a woman and it's her first time experiencing that. And it was like as a teenager reading that, I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'd never read a character be explicitly like queer on the page.
I was going to say, because I don't know that I've read many explicitly queer characters when I was young. I'm a lot older than you guys. And I think maybe the classics were like maybe Virginia Woolf might be the first time I remember thinking it. But then I don't know. There weren't many, were there?
No, I don't feel there were many when I was younger. Like I remember reading Loras Tyrell in Game of Thrones and being like, this is a gay guy. And that was like an explicitly gay guy. So I was like, okay. And then I remember reading City and the Pillar, which is a 1948 book by, I want to say Gore Vidal.
Wow, dropping the big names,
Yeah,
Harry.
is that a big name? I don't know if that's a big name.
Okay, that just makes me love you
is
more.
that a name?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Gore Vidal was a
you
quite
took-
famously queer
Yeah,
guy.
I remember reading that when I was in high school and being like, oh, this is really like,
Oh,
that
you
was
read
good.
Gore Vidal in high school? That's
Yeah.
quite impressive.
Well, it was only The City and the Pillar. It's not, I wouldn't say it's
It's
that like,
only the sitter in the pillar.
I wouldn't say
It's
it's
getting
that,
more
it was
impressive
that
by
like
the second.
eloquent. It was just a
I
good
feel like
story.
we have to remember that Harry's favourite like books are The Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the
So
Rings.
it's like,
That's
you
right.
know.
He leans to the literary actually.
Yeah. So I liked, like, I remember that book. And then I remember thinking that Moraine Sedai in The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Oh, God, again, I'm bad with these people's names. I remember thinking that she was gay at the time, but then she wasn't in the book.
There was a lot of implicit, right? There's
Yeah.
a lot of characters you can do a reading of. Like even if you look at, I keep bringing up Anne of Green Gables lately. I don't know why. But even if you looked at Anne and Diana, there were a lot of like coded characters that you could read that way.
Yeah, a coded character. I think that's where I kind of like sit there in terms of what I was reading and thinking about, but I can't really recall the ones.
I'm not sure if
young.
there just wasn't any queer characters in the books I was reading, or if it's just that I was getting all my books from my Catholic school library.
I was about
So
to say,
true.
did you go to
Yeah.
Catholic school?
Yeah, for me it was Raven Cycle. Maggie Stavata's The Raven Cycle.
I love those books.
So good. But yeah, again, I don't think there was a lot growing up of explicitly out and proud queer people in the novels I was reading. But again, I think I was getting my book recommendations from the straight white world in which I was being raised.
Because even in film and television, there hasn't been a lot until quite recently.
Yeah.
Like there was like the L Word, and there are a few things here and there, but I feel like this century has been much better for representation.
Yeah, because there was stuff in the 90s, but then it faded off again.
Yeah.
And then it came back and
Yeah.
it was short-lived.
Or
And
it's-
now it's
But even in the 90s
kind
though,
of.
like you had
Ellen DeGeneres. Oh, that's about
yes, and she had a hell of a time coming out.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was bad time. But even you had things like Will and Grace, where you know a lot of the queer people were played by straight people and played for laughs. Justina's next question I really liked was, what was your first encounter with queer romance?
I wrote that question without having thought about it myself, and I realized that I don't.
And you're famous for blanking.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing going on here.
I'll say
Empty.
something
There's
that
too
like
much going on there is actually the truth.
personally my experience with queer romance was when I came out as gay. But in fiction, I think I'm yet to find queer romance.
Oh, tell us
wow.
about this, Harrison.
I don't think that the current, like I'm looking into at the moment with my PhD in kind of exploring the theory that the current romance formula doesn't allow for actual queer romance. So I think, it's pretty bold.
As I said, it's a
Look,
very
It's
bold.
a big manifesto statement,
what
but
you're
I fucking
saying-
love doing that. So
So you're saying it's like a heteronormative structure.
very heteronormative structure. And I think
Is
that
it specifically your experience of queerness isn't represented in the...
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
stuff I'm dissecting at the moment, because obviously people like the author's context is going to be vital to whatever they're researching, whatever they're writing. But I think that, I'm not finding any experiences that feel similar or representative of what it was like to come out in the, it's still early 21st century.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is still based on the 80s and the 90s
Yeah.
and that type of like
And partly
experience.
that's because publishing works so slowly that by the time people are publishing, they're older.
Yeah.
And that there's not that many people in their early 20s or mid 20s publishing. So you don't, maybe in Indian fanfic, but not in traditional publishing.
Yeah, trad publishing is slow to pick up what I think is the new generation of queerness.
Yeah.
But indie is too fast.
Yeah.
I think is the other side of it.
And
Indie's too fast
I
that they
think-
fall into the pitfalls of these progressive traits of queerness without actually allowing society to have time to unpack these new progressive traits of
Oh,
queerness.
can you tell us what you mean by that? What
Yeah.
Can
well,
you do some unpacking?
That's
Was it-
that's very first draft thinking, 'cause that's the next chapter that I'm working on, that I started working on last night. And I was just sitting there with a glass of wine being like,
Fresh. This is hot off the press.
interesting.
thing.
Yeah, this is hot off the press.
take.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
nobody fucking take this. But yeah, I think that there's we progress really, really far as a society in terms of what we allow and what we kind of want to talk about, right? So like we've got gender debates at the moment. We've got where queerness is going backwards because of conservatism.
Or like the response of society to queerness.
The response
rather
of
than
society, sorry,
queerness
not
itself.
actual queerness. Yeah, you get what I mean.
Queerness isn't going
Thank you
trad
for
wife on us. It's fine.
No, no, we're not all voting for who, But yeah, I think you see we've got that split at the moment between society and progression, and it becoming like a hot topic, like full of buzzwords and debates. And indie publishing will pick up on that straight away because they are so fast and start writing those kind of stories before they even finish in society. So you get these really like I can already see there's already conservative Republican fiction about like those men fucking feminine men in indie publishing. And I'm like, that debate hasn't ended. Like that this really intense like war that we're in with, all those political ideologies.
Wokeness.
Yeah, wokeness against wokeness.
Like being awake is a bad thing.
Well, literally,
Yeah.
like caring about other people is awful. You know?
Out of curiosity and coming from someone who doesn't identify in the space, are you saying then that someone who, like a queer person writing a queer story doesn't make a queer story? You think that there needs to be more, like, is there no space for just a queer story to exist without having to speak politically or socially or culturally?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there are spaces for it. I think I'm yet to find them.
I
Right.
think
Yeah.
in our current climate, it's kind of impossible to write those stories without them saying something politically. But I feel that way about almost anything.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like, you might not go into writing something, like, not every writer has to go into writing something thinking, okay, I'm going to make a political statement with this. But regardless of your intention, it will be making a political statement. Because, you know, the political is personal, the personal is political, etc.
Yeah.
But gender and sexuality are so complex that they're so hard to separate from your writing.
But I guess what you're you tell me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is that what you'd like is more variety of representation. That
100%.
It's like you feel like it falls into a pattern and you don't find yourself in that pattern.
Yeah, I think that there's a very narrow view of queerness.
Yeah.
It's based on, and by queerness, I'm talking from my perspective as a gay white male. So it's most of my research looks at male on male romance.
Yeah.
I can't really speak much to the sapphic area or any of the gender fluid, like fiction that we have out there as well, because that's just not my specialty. And I haven't consumed a lot of it enough to speak critically on it. I haven't even consumed enough on gay fiction to speak critically about it. But I have opinions. And I write a shit ton of stuff about it. So I'm trying to form some sort of, educated analysis of it. But yeah, I just don't think I think it's a really narrow-minded view. And it just reminds me of exactly the type of thing you were saying before, Amy. The 90s where gay men in particular were there for the laughs. They were there to be like the comical character that was over the top, that was really focused on sex, and they would always they were always drinking. They were always doing all these, habits that you would associate with back in that time. These like housewife, they were given the housewife treatment.
I feel like there was a lot of stereotyping of queer characters when we first started to see explicitly queer characters in mainstream media. And then I've seen almost a pushback against that goes so hard in the reverse, where there's an attempt to erase any visible queerness from a character and write characters who just happen to be queer, but they're normal. They're just like a straight person.
Yeah, there's lots of pushback at the moment about the coming out story and saying that it's one and done and that everybody should just be out and proud. But like that's so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
So when people are saying, "Oh, but I'm so sick of reading coming out stories," I'm like, "Well, then don't read the coming out story." I know people that don't like Second Chance, so they don't pick up the Second Chance book. They don't go and hassle the publisher and say, "Oh, I'm so sick of these. Like this should be finished," and start harassing the authors and stuff. If you don't want coming out stories, don't read coming out stories. But I agree. There's a pushback where it is an erasure of queerness, or it's a very, very slim portion of the queer community that they're representing, because that one's malleable and that one can suit the wider audience that they're marketing to.
Is there something, might be a really ignorant thing to say, is there something about threat and non-threat? Like that what we tend to see a lot of is representations that don't feel threatening at all?
I think that is 100% true. And also kind of almost on a philosophical level that I don't necessarily think every single reader is thinking about, is things that are a threat on their own ideas of gender and sexuality. And I think the more threatening representations of queerness are the ones that are exploring that messy stickiness of like how gender is constructed. And
I completely agree.
Yeah. I think there's specifically a cis resistance to the idea that even cisgender identity is something that is messy and complicated and malleable.
Yeah.
They like to think of it as something that is fixed, whereas, representations of queer romance and queer characters that push back against that bring that into question.
Yeah.
Not to get all Judith Butler about it.
No, it's really cool because I think the thing that I remember when Judith Butler, like when gender performance came out, like the idea of a spectrum versus where we kind of got to this century was fixity, was like you had multiple kind of, it's a bit like Lego or stickle bricks, right? Like you tack one onto the other. Like I am a cisgendered white female who's, I don't know, demisexual, who's into this kink, who like there's like a identity to it that you've kind of constructed, instead of a sense that, well, that's me today, but I don't know where I'll be in 10 years or who I'm going to be in 2 minutes.
Or even if you stay exactly the same, what if everything around you changes?
Yes.
And the idea of what it means to be a cis woman
is different.
Completely changes.
Absolutely, which we can see it happening, right? So that's interesting. And to get back to romance, there's something about fixity in romance. Like it's a very fixed structure in many ways, which is what I think you're wrestling with maybe, Harry.
Yeah. And I think like that goes back to the debate that we've been talking about last month and the month before, which is that people will say, oh, well, it's what the audience want. It's what the market want. And then you kind of say to yourself, well, but you're right. That's you're feeding that. You're the author.
Yeah.
Right? So you can write something a little bit different.
And you can open up new markets. I mean, that's
Completely
what business
new
does.
markets.
And then if you screw capitalism, let's just make art.
Yeah. But see, like the romanticy formula, right? It's kind of got its own formula, but it's created its own formula because it's mixing fantasy and romance. So it doesn't necessarily always follow the romance formula. Sometimes it doesn't follow the fantasy formula. I mean,
like gender and sexuality, genre is also something that is not fixed and not stable.
Completely fluid, yeah. But we treat it like this type, or at least people do, you know. I do the same thing because I just finished writing a book, then went to analyze it and realized I had, to the T, done exactly every plot point in Regis's romance formula.
Did you? Wow.
To the T. I even included the scapegoat that gets kicked out of society.
Wow.
And
So
the
for those
wedding
of you,
and fate, like those unexpected accessories.
I think
can I just pause there, because a lot of people listening are not going to know what the hell we're talking about.
Sorry. I'm just coming into that shit.
So
No
Harry is
context.
referencing. Do you want to tell them what you're referencing?
I'm referencing Pamela Regis's eight essential romance elements. And then another theorist and author, Catherine Roach, then did it a couple years, like a decade later or so? It was like 20.
Yeah,
18?
like 13 years later.
13
or
years
something.
later. And Catherine Roach did one focused on women and added an extra element to it. But Regis has got, now I've got to do it on the spot, which is tricky.
Oh, you don't have to do it. It's like society defined.
Society defined, the hero, the meet cute, all that type of stuff. And when I was analysing my work, I was trying to talk about how the romance formula was really heteronormative, and why my first manuscript failed was because I thought I'd followed that formula to the T. So then I put an Excel spreadsheet up and I put all the elements on one side, and then I did Catherine Roach's on the other, and I did the accessories that Regis says, which is you've got like a personified barrier for the couple, so that like somebody that's in a love triangle, like fucking Eowyn in Lord of the Rings, you know, like get out of the way.
I liked her.
No.
I loved Eowyn.
Arwen is my one.
Oh,
And so
I like both of them. I can like both of them. I don't have to pick one.
But like they're there.
That's called Why Choose.
They're there then to get like scapegoated, or they have a change of heart and they have their own happy ending. And then there's supposed to be like a wedding or a fate or a dance that kind of symbolizes the society changing around the hero and the heroine.
And a celebration of change.
Yeah.
Like coming back together.
And I did absolutely every single element, even in my second book, and I moved every single goalpost. So I have no idea how it happened, but I was like, I think that's
because the 8 elements, I think, are just a romance-specific version of a hero's journey.
Yes.
And it's such an embedded story structure in Western storytelling.
Yeah.
That it's so hard because you don't realize how much of it you've consumed and how much it's shaped the way that you view narrative.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so embedded that we just that it's there. So no matter how hard I tried to work around it, it was like a wicked problem. Like I just ended up back in the same, or like a figure 8, should I say. I tried to take a left instead of a right, but I just still ended up
a figure
in
8,
the same.
8 essential elements. Oh my God, have we cracked it?
You should write that.
Yeah. Nobody take that. It's the second thing I'm TMing. But yeah, so I was like, oh shit, this is so, like it really is.
That comes through because you don't invent anything from scratch, right? Like you have all the romances you've ever seen. Like everyone points to Schitt's Creek, right? Like David and Patrick is this beautiful love story, but again, it's following the beats, right? And like, I guess what we're wrestling is like the questions we're asking is how gendered is it and how heterosexual is it?
At the same time, like I find even in myself, my research is trying to sort of break apart the romance structure. And at the same time, I question myself and I think, but why can't, like sometimes what you want is just a queer version of the rom-coms that you love. You know,
Yeah.
there is also space to have something that is just beat for beat exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I think when I'm sitting down and writing this stuff and I start writing these manifesto statements that get me all heated up and I'm like, all this motivation, like let's slam out all these words. And I go, I'm going to make that into a paper and I'm going to make that into a paper and I'm going to blow shit up. You know, anarchy, fucking anarchy. And then
This is so how you function as a
so
person.
how I function as a person. And then I think to myself, hang on a second, you know, am I just jettisoning joy, like jettisoning joy? And can I not just be, you know, happy with the fact that there are queer stories that are out there, that these romance books, and you're right. I read these books and I think this would be really good with two guys. And when that comes out with two guys, then I go, ugh, so not queer. And I'm like, why do I think that? Like, you know?
I think you can find joy in there being queer stories out there and still critique it.
And still critique.
I think you can have both.
Can I ask you a question? Of the books you're reading, how many of the male romances are written by queer men?
Oh, very few. I think I've read in total about 53 gay romance books.
Yeah.
And I've read 6 by queer men.
Oh.
That seems like that might be part of the issue,
A bit of
right?
an issue, yeah. I definitely think so.
Because
But
we
I
have
also see the
Patrick
formula.
Lenton. We're interviewing Patrick Lenton this month, and we all heard an excerpt. Justina interviewed him at an event at Dimmicks last year sometime, and he did a reading of his book, and I was like, actually, and again, straight cis woman saying this, but I thought his male queer rom-com was great, the reading of it. I felt like he hit the beats but queered it at the same time. I might be wrong, but
Yeah, I'm really excited for that book to come out because it just, even that reading felt so exactly that feeling you get from reading rom-coms.
It's like a
Abby
fizzy
did say to me
feel.
afterwards, Harry, you're going to love this book.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't believe Harry
Yeah.
wasn't there
Like,
to listen
yeah.
to it. I was like, Harry, this is a book for
A
you.
book for me,
It's
yeah.
so good. Like, it just gives you
And
the
it's-
fizzy feeling, and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait for
And
this romance.
the main character had so much like inner sarcasm and like the way that he was viewing the scenario. I was like, oh my God, Harry's going to love this.
Yeah, there for this.
I love when you meet a cynical character in a romance and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait until you find love.
I think cynical characters are the best when
Yeah.
it comes to a romance. I want somebody that's slightly morally grey, not too much that they go too far. But yeah, that's pretty much all I write. My people have the worst outlook on life.
So can I throw in the question of monogamy? Because I know this is something that you guys have thought about with your own writing and with your research, because of the idea that monogamy is so often tied up with reproduction and marriage and a lot of heterosexual kind of structures around relationships. And I know we do have a lot of like polyamorous books now, and we have a lot of harem and reverse harem books, and there are different ways to approach it. But how, in terms of queer romance and queer fiction, you think about the role of monogamy?
I think that's a tricky question because whilst I want to read more about non-monogamous couples, I also understand the comfort and the safety in keeping a couple monogamous for the sake of that happily ever after romance feeling.
Yeah.
And I
So
think
can
it
you
is-
have a happily ever after though that's non-monogamous?
I think you can, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can.
Yeah.
I feel like to me personally, it's not so much about whether the couple is monogamous or polyamorous at the end of a story. I think it's an individualist versus a collectivist approach to happiness. That's how I'm thinking about
Yeah, that's
happiness
fair.
in like a happily ever after sense. of
So
like-
that they're devoted to each other's happiness. and
yeah, they're
well-being.
devoted to each other's happiness, and they're also they exist within a loving community.
Yeah.
Rather than that the individual happiness of a couple is sort of the be all and end all of what a happily ever after can be.
Yeah. So if you were to want to talk about some authors who do it well, like a good happily ever after, I know you're writing about some for your thesis.
See, this is
where your mind goes
This is the
blank.
problem. This is where the head is empty. I've never read a book before.
Yeah,
Ever.
I always
I
think
don't
that.
think I have. I'm not sure I can read.
Somehow you got through all those degrees and never once edited books,
I
never
have-
read it.
So many creative writing degrees for someone who can't read and has never read a book.
Do you want me to give you a prod? What do you think of Cat Sebastian?
Love Cat Sebastian.
That's fair. You liked it. I like TJ Klune. I think TJ Klune's been one of the authors that I've seen do actually all right. And then Holden Shepherd. Holden Shepherd, who I think is in Perth. I want to say is in Perth. Also wrote one. I can see. I'm not going to be able to tell you the name of the book.
That's fine.
One very good, Happily Ever After, where I was like, this is really good. There was one which I posted, and I posted on Instagram, and the author actually DM'd me to be like, "Oh, what do you think of the book?" And I was like, "Oh, fuck." You're
going to get another DM after this.
And if he's following this, he might do the same again and say, "Oh, you did like it? Why didn't you reply?"
You didn't reply?
I didn't reply. I freaked out because I didn't know. I believe the book was called Not Like Other Dads by Sean Zaps, and it was about going into a relationship with a man who had children from his ex-wife, and it was really, really good. Like it was just it wasn't really like a romance story per se. It was kind of like a memoir mixed with a romance.
Cool.
Because I kind of a bit like is it Augustine Burroughs?
August.
August Burroughs. Yeah. Kind of like that kind of style of writing, and yeah, it was beautiful. It was just a really touching story because it kind of mixed the idea of heterosexualism, because a guy that was with a woman and then had a bunch of children and then left that relationship and then got with a guy in about his 30s. He had 3 kids with him, and I just thought, I was like, this would be insane.
Oh, can we talk about, that's a good segue to maybe bring in bisexuality as a issue too, because I think bisexuality gets underrepresented in fiction.
All the time.
Yeah.
I think it's underrepresented socially as well, like in the community. I still meet people that don't think that it's a thing. It doesn't exist.
They
They just don't think it exists.
That's not a thing.
Yeah, they're like, what are you talking about?
We all do that.
I remember, actually, it's a young adult book, and I love this as a representation of bisexuality. It's called Ramona Blue, by an author who definitely has a name as well.
we are the worst researchers.
Yeah.
But you've got the title of an author, you've got the title of a book, we're getting it.
Oh, okay.
But I remember I read this book because it was really controversial really controversial on an incredibly niche section of the queer book Tumblr, where people review bombed it before it was released because some people were viewing it as a story about a lesbian character who manages to find the right guy, rather than being a bisexual coming of age story about a bisexual character who starts to realize, more about her own sexuality. And people were review bombing this book before reading it. And when I read the book, I thought it was beautiful. It was such a lovely romance. And crucially, she's not the only queer character in the whole book. So it's hard to have those conversations where people are so ready to feel probably because they've been betrayed before in their reading experiences. So ready to see the worst in something rather than, looking at it for what it is.
It's really interesting because I'm not going to name any names because it's going on things. I have people in my life, I have someone in my life who came out as bisexual and then has ended up with a man, and then other people in their life have been like, oh, I just got used to you being gay, now you're with a man. And
Still
it's yeah, nothing about that individual's sexuality has changed in the slightest. So yeah, there is that erasure of bisexuality. Now you're with a man, you're quote unquote normal again, which is just not. Yeah.
Just full stop. Who really gives a fuck about who people sleep with?
Right.
Apparently we all do.
Apparently everybody does.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just insane to think about. Oh, I got so used to you being with a man, so you were sitting in bed thinking about me with a man. That's really fucking weird. Yeah. I don't think about you fucking your girlfriend. So,
So Justina's got a really interesting question here around idealism as well, about I guess if we're talking romance, that they're idealized texts. And this is what you're kind of gesturing at, I think, Harry. And Justina, I think you haven't talked about it today, but I'm sure your research is in this area too. That what are we idealizing about queer relationships? Clearly, if we're fetishizing male-male relationships for a straight audience, that's something. But if you're thinking about an own voice text that's looking to idealize a relationship, in your work, what do you want to idealize about relationships?
Fucking heavy.
I know Justina's got some thoughts.
I do have some thoughts. I think I mean, what I like reading in romance is characters who are like really, like my requirement for a romance novel is that it needs to make me believe that love is real. And I was like, I want characters who are like crazy about each other in like, sometimes like not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a healthy way. I'm like quite happy to read unhealthy relationships as long as they're like feral about each other.
I love it when they're enjoying them, like when they're enjoying being together. You know, when you get a riff of dialogue or something and you're like, oh, this is fun. I could hang out with you too. This is fun.
Yeah. I want that, like, that messy relationship. Like those tough conversations, those really like weird, awkward moments that you can make comedic, because it's always like that when you're in love. You'll just find yourself doing something really weird, and then you'll just be like, 2 years ago I had no idea who you were, and now here we are doing this really fucking weird thing, and it's just totally normal.
The lack of specificity there is just making my imagination run wild.
Let it run wild. Everybody that's listening as well, let it run wild.
I think on some level, at least for me, the appeal of romance, of the idealism of the romance genre is in general, is the fantasy of being completely known by someone and then completely accepted.
And that's hard when it comes to queerness.
Yeah.
It's hard to get across when it comes to queerness. I think
Why?
because it's
Why
so
do you
complex.
think that is?
Because there's so many different parts to somebody's past. You know, like
Yeah.
when you meet somebody, and obviously, again, I'm talking from a gay male perspective, so I'm sorry if this is mean to any heterosexuals that are out there.
Oh, be
But-
mean. We can take it.
Be mean.
Are you about to be heterophobic on the pod?
I live as a heterophobe. I'm joking.
But some of my best friends are het.
I think when you come into a queer relationship, there is the potential for there to be really small and then really large pockets of trauma and
Yeah.
pockets of identity crises that don't fit together, because there's so many stages to growing up. I think there's, like, take example for when if you're in your 20s and you have come out later in life. So there are obviously people that come out when they're 15. There are
Yeah.
people that come out when they're 21, or people when
Or
they're
50.
50.
Like
Yeah.
21 later in life, yeah.
Yeah, 20, late in
Yeah,
life.
so
yeah,
old.
Late in life, yeah.
You've got to be Botoxing by 21, man. That's so old.
But like, then you're missing a part of your childhood, right? Like if you come
Yeah.
out when you're 22, if you come out when you're 25, you've lived your entire teenage years as somebody that wasn't overly sure of who they are. So then you go into this whole other teenage experience, but you're a 25-year-old. So you get to like relive all these weird moments, but you're wiser and you're more responsible. Yeah, you have more responsibilities and you're older. And
That is
you
a thing that's frequently talked about in terms of queer experiences, is that idea of a delayed adolescence. Almost.
yeah.
That you're going out and seeking those first milestones that people had as teenagers.
And so how do you get full acceptance from the person that you're in a relationship with, when you could both have really different experiences growing up, which are so linked to, very personal things like identity and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you get into this really messy problem, into how to queer something.
Yeah.
Because there is such a wide range of experiences with queerness, and it is so linked to somebody's personhood that it becomes either really washed down, like you were saying before. So like we pull apart, we take away all the queerness to make them just a lump
You're
of a
trying
character.
so hard to push back against stereotypes that you end up, shaving away the edges of a character and making them a non-entity.
Literally just this 2D thing on a page that has nothing to them.
Can I ask a question that might be like, I can only ask this because I know you guys well and you'll judge me nicely. And this might be a really stupid and ignorant question, but I've always thought about how being heterosexual, you often feel like you're in a relationship with another, like with someone whose experience, your body is so different to mine.
Yeah.
Your sexuality is maybe different to mine. I know it's all a construct, but it's constructed differently to mine. Your levels of power in the world are different to mine. I think you feel like you're in a relationship with someone quite alien to you sometimes. And there's also a level of, there's so many jokes about it, right? Like so many jokes about my husband does this or doesn't understand this, or my wife does this and doesn't understand this, or and how that changes in a queer relationship. Like, do you feel that otherness in the same way? Like you're talking about trauma, like a shared different traumas, and they maybe don't match up, but is it similar or different? Or
I kind of feel like that feeling you're talking about to me is the patriarchy.
I wanted to come in and be like, I feel that, but I also feel it because I am fearful of the patriarchy. And as someone who's in like a dating scene, yeah.
And I think the patriarchy does definitely exist in queer spaces.
Oh, wow.
And in same-sex relationships.
100%.
It's so embedded in our culture. Like we were talking about, you know, the hero's journey and narrative structure. Like the patriarchy is the narrative structure that we as a society understand, like the world. And it's so difficult to break free of that. You have so many embedded beliefs that you don't even know you have.
Yeah.
And then there's the intersectionality of it, right? Like, because you have different class axes, different races, different ages, like all the different ways you intersect with each other where you are kind of alien to each other.
And you put two men in a relationship together, whether young or old, and you've got two people that inherently prosper off the patriarchy, regardless of what their sexuality is. I am still higher up on the scale of the patriarchy and less likely to be, you know, run over by the bulldozer. There's probably people that will
Depends
go first.
who's running the bulldozer, probably.
I would also say that
conservatives, I guess.
Hey, conservatives.
Yeah,
the other thing is that every single queer relationship does have a boy one and a girl one.
Completely agree.
Which one are you, Justina?
You know, Millie was talking about this in Cli-Fi, and it was like, well, you know, one of the people in lesbian romance always has to strap on. And I was like, yeah, well, there's always one like man that has the body of a god and a huge fucking penis, and then there's always some effeminate twink that wears rings and has his nails fucking painted, and you're like, which one's the woman? Like, you know, like, it's fucking frustrating. And so that's another thing that I fucking hate about queer romance. Drives me nuts.
I mean, that's why I'm so interested in, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I have to name drop Jack Halberstam.
Yes.
Female masculinity, especially, is something that I'm really interested in, the way that, like, yeah, the idea of there's a masculine one and a feminine one in any relationship. And you see it reflected in queer romance as well. But I'm like, our understandings of what is masculine and what is feminine are so constructed and so messy. And it's actually such a interesting space to play around with and what happens.
I love that we can be brought together, despite our sometimes conflicting opinions, by Jack Halberstam.
Yeah,
because I love the queer art of failure, which is like everything is fucked. This is bullshit.
Millie's not here right now, but Millie used the queer art of failure very heavily in that thesis, and it was amazing.
Just love it. Jack Halberstam can bring any queer person together.
We had a reading group, didn't we, last year, and Justina actually gave us that reading.
Female masculinity.
And
that was amazing.
It was incredible to think about if you see masculinity on like a body that isn't coded masculine, how you can recognize the behaviors of masculinity. It was a great article. We'll put it up on the show notes for people. Yeah. All right. So any recs before we leave? Any recs for queer romance you'd like people to go have a look at, or that they might want to be interested in?
I would like people to rec me things.
Oh,
I would like to
okay.
receive recs from our audience. I think we might have mentioned this during Smut Month, but I really want romantasy, like sapphic recs.
Interesting. I would say, you know, go read my old mate Gore Vidal. Terrific shit. And then another one from the 70s called Dancer in the Dance. Top tier. Like absolutely amazing.
All right, we've got to hurry it up because I think recording's about to cut off on us.
Oh my gosh.
Quickly.
No, this is too much pressure. I'm just going to recommend, even though it's not a romance, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters.
Yeah,
Love that
awesome.
book.
I really love Sarah Waters. I really liked the second one. We're off camera on one camera, by the way, because we ran out of time.
Can I just say how lovely it is that the production value drops when the queer people are on the couch?
Anyway,
I'd like
just
to mention that I'm on the
explain, for those of
couch.
you listening along at home and not watching us, one of the cameras just died and we ran out of time. But, you know, and also the queer person was operating the camera. So
Yeah, damn it.
you just slagged her off.
Mine's still running, so it's okay.
So Justina, while we're still recording audio, Justina recommended Fingersmith. But what were the other books? She has a whole bunch. Night Watch was really good.
Night Watch was really good. If you want a happy book, don't read that one.
Yeah, yeah, okay, good. It's not romance, but a queer love story. But Fingersmith, I think, is one of the best books I've ever read.
Really?
That actually blew me away.
It's so good.
Oh yeah, you have to read it.
I've got to read
really
that
good.
then. That sounds
It
wild.
will. It twists so many times, and you don't see it coming.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Putting it on my TBR
yeah,
at the top. Because if you're saying it's going to be good, both of you are saying it's good.
yeah. I mean, I still think Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway is great, but also not a romance.
Yeah, you did like Virginia Woolf.
I
Same
love
with Clan of the
That-
Cave Bear.
That from Harry is his way of saying I
That
hated the heck out
takes
of
me
that
back
book.
to when it
you
was set as
did
a
it
reading.
in first year, and if you went back to it now,
Oh,
you'd
anything I
read
read
it
in undergrad,
differently.
I cannot
doesn't
judge my opinion of it because I in undergrad is not me now.
I heard first years at the uni talking about Clan of the Cave Bear. Well, I say first years, they looked young.
Yeah.
They
Okay,
look
we're gonna
fun.
have to wrap up.
Sorry.
On that
We're getting
note.
into gossip now.
Popped into my
All
mind.
right. Well, I'd like to thank Harry, Abby, and Justina for joining me to launch Pride Month. We're really excited. It's Pride Month, and we've got some cool things coming in the next 3 weeks. So we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.